Howdy. I love Westerns, don't you? Westerns are a unique American art form like jazz. They define, or at least one time defined, who we are as a people. Now, 120 years ago, historian Frederick Turner wrote in what became known as the Frontier Thesis that the westward movement of Americans helped shape democracy and form our national character, for better or worse. Old European ideas about society, character, and government were redefined as Americans migrated west and followed what they called manifest destiny. This westward movement spun much legend, first chronicled in dime novels and pulp magazines. In time, legend assumed the status of mythology. The real frontier was no more, or had gone elsewhere. One place it went was to a new entertainment medium called motion pictures. Now, according to the estimate by a British Film Institute companion to the Western, more than 7,000 Westerns were made during the 20th century for commercial cinema houses. Most are forgotten, if not lost outright. But I remember the classics, films that certainly achieved masterpiece and sometimes perfection status. Now, as much as I hate top 10 lists, don't you? Well, you have to do it. It's too much fun. So here are my choices, for better or worse. And I start with two picks each by the two masters of the genre, John Ford and Sam Peckinpah. Up first in my list is Stagecoach by John Ford from 1939. Arguably the first adult Western, certainly of the sound era. Ford sets the tone right up front when Doc Boone, played by Thomas Mitchell, says, "We're the victims of a foul disease called social prejudice." And the larcenous banker Gatewood says, "Remember, what's good for the banks is good for the country." He then runs off with $50,000 of the bank's money. Attempts to get away on the stagecoach. Let me read you a few of the lines that Gatewood says, because even though this is 1939 movie, it's not out of date at all. Gatewood's sitting on the stagecoach seat with $50,000 of stolen money on his lap. Starts to rant about, "I don't know what this government is coming to. They're even talking now about having bank examiners, as if we bankers don't know how to run our own banks. The government must not interfere with business. We must reduce taxes. Our national debt is something shocking, over $1 billion a year. What this country needs is a businessman for president." Well, that's why I love John Ford and why old Western movies just never die or fade away. Now, don't forget, without Stagecoach, Citizen Kane would have been a very, very different movie. Orson Welles learned his craft by studying Stagecoach in detail. All right, number 2 in the hit parade from John Ford is The Searchers, 1956. Both Stagecoach and The Searchers are masterpieces made of the same stuff called John Ford. If Stagecoach was premised on a foul disease called social prejudice, then The Searchers could be premised on a foul disease called racism. It was certainly topical at that time when the civil rights movement was struggling to get organized in this country. Mixed with vengeance and obsessions, The Searchers was indeed an explosive story on the screen. John Wayne's dark portrayal of a man filled with hatred was arguably among his best, if not the finest acting of his career. Now, the second master of the genre is Sam Peckinpah, no doubt, who made so many fine Westerns. They're all almost masterpieces. But I'll select two, and I start with Ride the High Country from 1962. This was Sam's second feature film and his first breakthrough film. Starred veteran Western actors Joel McCrea and Randolph Scott as two old-timers of the West who take on a payroll delivery job. They are aging, and the West is changing, a consistent theme in Peckinpah's Westerns. And so is the Western, informed no doubt by Sam's television experience. It was changing too, and he lent his experience to it. It has all the heart of a masterpiece and plays just as fresh today as I'm sure it did then. My next, number 4, film by Sam Peckinpah again must surely be The Wild Bunch from 1969. Sam made a lot of Westerns that can be called masterpieces, but this has to be his perfect masterpiece. Considered remarkably violent at the time, it is still remarkably violent today, but in a way that sets it apart from more contemporary fare. Times have changed for the Old West in filmmaking, but they don't make them like this anymore for sure. Jerry Fielding's underscore and Lucien Ballard's photography are perfect. The Wild Bunch is a perfect film, a masterpiece. Now, speaking of perfect masterpieces, they just keep on coming. Number 5 on my hit list is Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven from 1992. Clint dedicated this movie to Don Siegel and Sergio Leone, but I think Eastwood is more the John Ford of our times. A superb storyteller, his westerns owe much to John Ford. In fact, Unforgiven makes a direct reference to Ford when we see Will Money at the grave of his wife. That was a Fordian shot. Eastwood's shooting and production style is not dissimilar to Ford's. He brought him in on time and on budget, and he rarely had to resort to multiple takes. Unforgiven mirrors a complex and conflicted time in American society. Who is good? Who is bad? What is good? What is bad? Well, it's almost pretty much the same people and same things, mostly. I nominate David Webb Peoples' screenplay for the best Western script ever. But in fact, Unforgiven is a perfect masterpiece in every way. Way beyond being a great Western. It's a great movie, period. Okay, number 6, Fred Zinnemann's High Noon from 1952. Do not forsake me, oh my darling. It's edgy, dark, somewhat noirish, although it's not film noir. Floyd Crosby, the father of David, was the director of photography who researched Civil War photographs to recreate a stark look for the picture. Gary Cooper stars, of course, and it is the breakout film for a brand new actress, Grace Kelly. High Noon was a successful film at the box office, but nevertheless angered many people who saw it as un-American. This was a time when Senator Joseph McCarthy and the House Un-American Activities Committee were trampling on the constitutional rights of Americans, and Hollywood writers were blacklisted for supposed communist leanings. High Noon made a courageous statement about an individual in a corrupt society. Now, personal favorite as a child, I saw this at the drive-in theater from the back seat of my parents' car in the golden era of drive-in theaters. George Stevens' Shane from 1953. It's a truly optimistic, hopeful vision, of the early Eisenhower years it reflected. Perhaps it was the first film to really show the devastating impact of what a .45 caliber gun could do to a man. Loyal Griggs was the director of photography, and he used long lenses, telephoto lenses, to emphasize the Teton Mountains towering over Jackson Hole Valley in a somewhat unnatural way, but it's very dramatic and very, very beautiful. My next three westerns are decidedly unconventional. By the mid-1950s, the old horse opera was giving way to social forces beyond the old conventions and standards. Conventions were completely thrown overboard in 1954 when a feminist, anti-McCarthy operatic Western melodrama by Nicholas Ray was released, Johnny Guitar. This is out of the ordinary. The film was made as a vehicle for Joan Crawford. Now, Joan Crawford in pants, wearing a six-shooter and battling Mercedes McCambridge as the antagonist, was just a bit too over the top for contemporary audiences who expected perhaps another Shane. When Scott Grady as the dancing kid asked Johnny Guitar, played by Sterling Hayden, "Can you play the guitar?" Johnny answers, "Can you dance?" So they do. Not the sort of stuff you expect in a conventional odor. But Nicholas Ray pulls it off. Johnny Guitar did well in Europe and apparently left an impression on Sergio Leone, who years later paid homage to it in Once Upon a Time in the West. Johnny Guitar also carried a strong subtext of anti-McCarthyism, a lot of that going around those days. And Peggy Lee wraps the film with her fine vocal of the passionate love theme song, which probably cements Johnny Guitar as a horse opera forever. Johnny Guitar is not a perfect movie or masterpiece, maybe, but it is another expression of what Doc Boone diagnosed, that foul disease called social prejudice. Now, after all this legendary romantic mythology, one could stand a cold bucket of realism just for counterbalance. So, I've always admired Heartland, and it's number 9 on my list, from 1979. It's based on the true memoirs of Eleanor Stewart, a homesteader in western Wyoming of 1910. No gunfighters or Indians or saloon brawls in this one. This story is the real Little House on the Prairie. This gem of realism does not pull any punches. Life was hard, tough, brutal, unforgiving. A struggle to survive on the land at the most basic levels. That's what the West was most often about. The performances by Conchata Ferrell and Rip Torn in the leads here are nothing short of perfect. Okay, we've reached number 10 spot, and I can just not leave without giving praise to what may be the dumbest, most over-the-top, crazy, insane, loathsome Western ever made, Blazing Saddles. Yep, 1974 by Mel Brooks. Controversial in its time, and still now. Blazing Saddles could probably not be made or should not be made today. Mel Brooks is a genius, a national treasure, and one of the most courageous filmmakers ever. It takes real guts to look evil in the face and smash it with laughter and comedy, as someone said. Chaplin and Lubitsch did it in their films, but not many filmmakers can pull that sort of thing off. So then, what have we? Well, 10 movies about social prejudice, feminism, McCarthyism, racial prejudice, a lot of social issues that are almost pertinent to today, if not then. Each film is in its own way a perfect masterpiece. So thanks for watching, and so long for now, partners.